over,
definitely,
by that game.
Yeah, well, it's definitely foreshadowing period of the way that some of these characters are portrayed, not just in the video games, but in the comics as well. But, I mean, I guess the reason why... I mean, we talk a lot about Gotham on this show, but, I mean, the reason why you had brought up Gotham and all this and with Batman is because of a conversation that you actually had today on the bus.
As someone who is a very, a fan of TV shows, you get quite excited when you see other or hear other people who like the shows the same as yourself. But what entertained me this morning, especially on the bus, was first thing in the morning, I'm on the bus and there's this guy sitting there watching Gotham on his phone. And, to me, that shows how popular a show can actually be when you'd rather watch Gotham on your phone sitting on the bus than even acknowledge any living human beings around you. And I envy that. If my phone had enough battery power or, enough, space on the phone to be able to do that, I'd be watching Gotham all the time as well. And that is huge. But what entertained me the most was when I finally got his attention and I mentioned, "Oh, you're watching Batman." And he proceeded to pretty much shove my foot in my mouth by explaining that Gotham is not Batman. It is not a story about Batman or, any of that stuff. It is about Gotham itself. And I think that's a very unique way of looking at it because, they do focus on Bruce Wayne becoming Batman and all these villains, the whole enchilada, but ultimately it's about Gotham becoming Gotham.
Well, exactly. I mean, we're seeing kind of like the origin stories of everyone. I mean, we're seeing the origin story of Jim Gordon, his journey towards becoming the commissioner, the Gotham, police department. We're seeing, how did Selina Kyle go from being a street rat to being, a, cat burglar? We're seeing how, the Joker, whoever he or she's going to be, is coming together. We're seeing, Oswald Cobblepot, and how his journey towards, completely being the Penguin.
But, even with all these origin stories, it's shaping, what Gotham is to be, and the people are so much for Gotham, that it's really hard to explain, but without those characters, without those people, you wouldn't have the Gotham that Batman is needed in. And it's so interesting to see it from that point of view, and it definitely, it kind of took me back to begin with. I'm like, well, it is a story about Batman, and then listening to him explain, how Batman only becomes Batman because Gotham needed him, and it's just kind of that unique storyline.
Well, and again, if you're a fan of the comics, this is almost the opposite because we see that in the comics, Bruce Wayne becomes Batman to go off into avenge his parents' murder by going off and, fighting crime. And it's, upon him showing up as the Bat and starting to do some of these things that seems to go off and attract, got people like the Joker and, Penguin and the Riddler. And, so, I mean, it's very fascinating that Gotham is, again, taking the story and kind of putting it, on its head by going off and saying, no, the villains were there before Batman was there. Whether they realize that or not, is another story.
Yeah, I think it's a unique way of telling it, and I think it's probably the proper way of telling it. Everyone knows the story of Batman. Everyone knows, why Batman became Batman. But now they're showing why the villains became who they are. And ultimately, a whole different storyline of why Batman became Batman and, what the struggles and, the sacrifices he had to make along the way to become such a powerful figure in Gotham.
I think it would be very interesting to see. I mean, at some point, I will assume that they will do some sort of story arc where Bruce goes over to the Orient to go off and to learn martial arts, or they bring someone from Japan or China to to Gotham to go off and help, Alfred train him.
Well, and you look at Alfred when he was fighting Cupcake. Yes, Cupcake.
Cupcake.
A big, gigantic fighting machine named Cupcake. I would love to have a name like that.
I laughed, when I heard it because, I'm participate in a couple of electronic wrestling federations on the web, and my big insult with one of my characters is to call them a cupcake. So I think it's actually kind of funny.
But as they're fighting, though, you can see that Alfred's teaching him, not so much self-control and all that, but how to fight and when to pick your moments and when to pick your battles.
Exactly, the part where it looks like Alfred is getting his ass handed to him by Cupcake, and he really is. But he's absorbing this beating because he's waiting for Cupcake to slow down and tire so that he can choke him out.
See, the battle between Alfred and Cupcake reminds me of the battle of Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is Alfred, who got brutally killed, and then all of a sudden came around and wins. That's pretty much the best way to describe it. Just Cupcake isn't Irish. Or arrogant. Well, no, he was arrogant.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyways, guys, we're going to come back. Make sure you have your fedoras and whips ready because we're going to talk a little bit about Indiana Jones.
How do you know I have a whip?
I don't want to know.
I have a whip and a nay-nay. No, I do not.
We'll be back, guys.
Catch this music. Welcome back to the Captain Fizmask Guy show.
You know what I just realized? That, little conversation about the UFC fight was a perfect segue into your shows that are...
It was, and I kind of screwed that one up.
Yeah, and you're...
That's typical of...
So, of course, this Thursday night will be the debut episode of the Society of Sports.
SOS.
SOS. I still think you need to use the old Kofi Kingston theme song.
We haven't quite decided on theme songs. There are a few being thrown around. If you are listening and you are from the great state of Alabama, you may recognize some of our songs. Definitely the other host is a huge Alabama fan.
Alabama Slim.
I have recommended him to get his IQ tested, but he has assured me that he is quite intelligent and that I don't know football.
Well, you know what? He did move up to Canada, so that does say something about him.
Yeah, and he still hates our football. But
I don't necessarily like our football either. So
I've watched enough of college football to realize that he's actually kind of right.
So moving back onto your topic, it's been talked about. It's been announced
for the last 4 years.
Well, not for the 4 years, but I noticed this.
Give me the 4 years.
Walt Disney and a bunch of other outlets have went off and have announced that in 2019, Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford will bring out another Indiana Jones movie. With no George Lucas, apparently, which might be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you felt about the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Okay. First of all, I have a very important opinion on that movie. One is it wasn't just George Lucas's fault why that movie sucked. It was a complete all-around cesspool of storyline, script, acting,
Shia
directing.
LaBeouf?
Yes.
Shia LaBeouf.
Handing over the hat and then coming back and doing another Indiana Jones is absolutely 100% completely retarded.
So, what if they go off and they only have Harrison Ford in doing, like, some stories, kind of like what they did in the early episodes of the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, where they have him going off and kind of talking to some people, and then it works as a flashback to another actor who's going to take up the mantle.
Okay, if that is the case, and I was Harrison Ford's managerial rep thing, whatever you want to call him, I'd be saying, hell no. If he's only going to be playing a small part, there's no point to it. He has always been Indiana Jones. He has always been Han Solo. That's going to suck.
Especially if it isn't the same actor who plays both.
No. I have this interesting theory that if you don't know what I'm talking about, you have never seen Star Wars, and you are completely dead to me. They killed off Han Solo in Star Wars. What if they kill off Indiana Jones? So they would kill him off in both franchises that he basically helped make its own.
Very interesting. I was actually thinking of a different theory that Han Solo is, that all the adventures of Indiana Jones actually occurred as dreams to Han Solo while he was frozen in carbonite. And so, therefore, the universe that Han Solo is in, or Indiana Jones is actually just nightmares of, a smuggler frozen in carbonite.
That is so awesome, I'm confused.
And I mean, it's not a new theory. There's actually been around for a while. In fact,
Damn those conspiracy theories.
There's actually pictures floating around, and I'm sure you can find it if you go on the internet. Indiana Jones.
Internet has pictures?
Yes, they do.
Holy crap, I've been using it wrong.
I'm sure you haven't.
No, I haven't.
No, I know you. You've been looking at a lot of pictures.
I have been.
Yes.
It's not my fault. I like baby carrots.
Yes, lots and lots of baby carrots.
Yes, baby
carrots. But, I mean, there's a picture of Indiana Jones finding Han Solo frozen in carbonite. So, I mean, it kind of goes along with this theory that
would hurt my feelings. That would hurt my feelers so badly. Don't mess with my feelers. Yes, I feel like an insect now. I have feelers. They're on top of my antennae.
I think...
I
have nothing to say to that.
There is nothing to say to that.
No, there's nothing to say to that. So, I mean, I'm kind of, interested in this. I mean, if you've been a long-time listener of the podcast, and you'll know that I love, Indiana Jones movies. I love, all the Star Wars movies. And I have often, defended, the Crystal Skull by just simply saying, even though the movie sucks, it still rocks because it's an Indiana Jones movie.
I do not agree with that. I believe the only way to make Indiana Jones right or, great is to not make any more. Leave it as it is. They already screwed up it, the franchise. If they continue going and they continue to mess it up, it becomes nothing more than another Fantastic Four saga. And I don't want to see Indiana Jones go that route.
Okay, now, while I agree to a bit with that theory, there's one difference, though. There's never been a good Fantastic Four movie.
Shut up. In my head, there is. I made it yesterday. I was dreaming.
So, I mean, for all of those people who are, Fantastic Four movie fans...
What is wrong with you?
Exactly. My condolences. Go find the franchise that actually matters.
Like Star Wars.
Yes.
Or Deadpool.
Which will be awesome if they can find a really good actor to play Cable.
Yes. Cable. I'll play Cable.
I don't think you're a big enough actor. And besides, they need someone to play the straight man for Deadpool, and that's not you.
There's actually an interesting theory of having Andrew Garfield play a character in Deadpool and make jokes about how he's Spider-Man, but not actually Spider-Man, and, he's Peter Parkley, and, pulling him by his sweater.
I've actually heard an interesting idea. A Deadpool movie might actually be a good way to introduce a new actor to play Wolverine, and then have Deadpool go off and make break the fourth wall and make jokes about it.